All right, let's get this started. Kick, YouTube, Twitch. Oh, I got a message. New day, new stream. Okay. Live. Everything is working. Pause. Good. Okay. Mic, background sound, everything's working. All right. Look at chat, and then we'll get into it. All right. Activate, find and activate. No problems today. Doing well. YouTube showed up. Perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna change how I do things a little bit here. I want to go more deep into specific stories rather than what I've been doing, which is more a general look at the news. I want to find specific stories and go into more depth on them. So I've changed a couple things, including my AI that tries to find me good ideas to go through. Ooh, okay, we're gonna. So, plan is to go through one or two of these a day, in far more depth. So let's see what we have to pick from. The best pick this week: Canada Strong Fund. Ooh, and Spring Economic Update. That hasn't dropped, right? Like, I was watching the thing about the Canada Strong Fund, and he basically, I think it was okay. I'm probably gonna do this one, so let's read the 5 it gives me before I start going into detail. Canada's first sovereign wealth fund. I mean, just a good idea. Kuzma USMCA review. 5-day countdown. I mean, yeah. US-Iran war, ceasefire on Razor's Edge. I've actually heard that there's been some good signs on that front, that the Iranians were also seeking ceasefire terms recently. White House correspondent dinner shooting. Oh, that's right. I think that was being covered a lot. And that's all over the news. Gaza's first election in 20 years. I really like that one. Okay, let's look at the Canada Sovereign Wealth Fund stuff first. And then maybe look into this after. So, let's see what we're dealing with. Canada's first sovereign wealth fund. PM Carney announced today's Canada's first national sovereign wealth fund, the Canada Strong Fund, with an initial federal government contribution of $25 billion ahead of Tuesday's spring economic update. That's literally tomorrow. Being tabled in the House of Commons. Why? Norway built their sovereign wealth fund with oil savings. Carney wants to borrow $25 billion to build Canada's. Is this economic statecraft or the most expensive branding exercise in Canada's history? Ooh. All right, let's have a look at this. There. Best way to find it. Sovereign wealth fund. He's talking about. Canada's new sovereign wealth fund. Norway's 1.4 trillion sovereign wealth fund fully explained. I mean, I would like to hear about theirs, but Here, I kind of want a little bit longer of a video. I mean, like, let's hear both viewpoints, right? 6 minutes. Okay, let's have a look. We'll hear the announcement of it first.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced a new initiative that he says will help establish economic independence for Canada. It's being dubbed the Canada Strong Fund and will act as an investment vehicle for major new projects. Essentially, Canadians will be able to invest in the fund and share in its returns.
How does that work? Start a new chat here. I don't really like the voice mode in Claw. Try this. I hear that Canada has a... Not picking me up at all. Is this a problem with the settings or a problem on their side? Select default microphone. It was on my side. That one. I hear Canada has a sovereign wealth fund that they're creating, and that Canadian citizens are going to be able to participate. What is that going to look like? Let's let it think.
In unveiling the initiative, Carney said, quote, "Many of Canada's former strengths, built on our close ties with the U.S., have become our weaknesses." Here's more of what he had to say.
So here's how it works. A sovereign wealth fund is essentially a national savings and investment account. It's designed to grow wealth for future generations of Canadians.
Yeah, but it's usually best to create the sovereign wealth fund with excess capital. Like when you're, okay, just checking somewhere here. When you have a surplus, putting that surplus into a sovereign wealth fund is a really good idea. Putting, like, as far as I understand, like, the current government is running a massive deficit. And so they're trying to create an investment fund while essentially doing this on interest. Like they're doing it on debt. I guess we'll see more of that tomorrow when the public statement, because I'll let him talk, but I'm pretty sure he goes into that the economy, the economics of the country, we're actually doing pretty well right now. But I still see a large deficit. I'm not sure how that's possible.
Many countries that are blessed with natural resources like Norway have sovereign wealth funds. Canada hasn't had one until now. The new Canada Strong Fund will give all Canadians a direct stake in building Canada strong.
This announcement comes just before the spring economic update, which will happen tomorrow. The CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian joins us live from our parliamentary bureau with more. So, Rafi, this fund will begin with an initial investment by the government of $25 billion. Where is this money going to come from, and how will it be used?
That part about where it will come from is still a little bit of a
that's kind of an important question.
Question today, Hillary. We do know the government nodded toward the spring economic statement when asked about that, basically saying stay tuned. We also heard...
Yeah, they're basically saying wait till tomorrow where we can give you the spring economic statement.
Heard that the government says It's one of the only two G7 countries that can borrow at low cost internationally, so that gives us perhaps a bit of a hint of where the 25 billion is coming from. As for how it's going to be used, we got a little bit more detail there. The Prime Minister saying that Canadians will also be able to invest in it, of course, and that the government will use the money in conjunction with the private sector in order to build some of these big nation-building projects that this government has been talking about for about a year now. Have a little bit more of a listen to what he had to say.
It is not something for, I'm going to use the term from your question, rich people. It's something for Canadians, for all Canadians, everyday Canadians. And on that,
when you do something like that, it is the rich people that tend to benefit. Let's see. This is actually breaking news. Prime Minister Mark Carney announced it just this morning. Oh, yeah, look at that. Here's what we know so far. What it is. The Canadian Strong Fund is Canada's first national sovereign wealth fund designed to make sure that the returns from national building projects are shared with Canadians. We'll invest in strategic Canadian projects and companies alongside other investors, with a clear objective to achieve commercial returns and build the wealth of Canada. Like, this sounds good. Like, is this something that you get to put money into to see returns? Like a stock? I don't know. Let's see. How will it be funded? The fund will be seeded with 25 billion Canadian, about 18.4 billion US from the federal government. It will be professionally managed and independent of the government, meant to invest alongside the private sector in nation-building projects on a fully commercial basis. What will it invest in? The fund will invest in Canada projects and companies driving economic transformation, including clean and conventional energy. I like that one. Critical minerals, agriculture, and infrastructure. Okay, all of those are good. Returns will be reinvested to grow the Canadian Strong Fund and strengthen its capacity over time. Like, this is a really good idea, but it would suck if there was I don't know, like an economic crisis that turned this into a bad idea. Like it looks like there is on the horizon. How can regular Canadians participate? Individual Canadians can put money into the fund, and Carney suggests it would be similar to purchasing a government bond, where the initial investment is protected. Returns from those investments will be put back into the fund to expand its capacity and build out capital projects in Canada. How will it be structured? The Canadian Strong Fund will operate at arm's length from the government as a new Crown corporation, guided by a CEO and a qualified independent board of directors. This is designed to ensure the fund remains focused on its mission, supporting the transformation of the economy and creating wealth for Canadians. What's the timeline? The Spring Economic Update 2026. Tomorrow will formally announce the government's intention to create the fund. The government will consult over the coming months on the specific design of the retail investment instrument, and further details on the fund's mandate, structure, and implementation plan will be provided in the coming months. Bottom line is that many specific details, like the exact mechanics of how citizens invest, minimum investment amounts, and return structures, are still being worked out. So we got to keep an eye out for tomorrow's Spring Economic Update. Well, this is exciting. I like this.
That scale to provide it, and we'll provide it in a way, again, we'll consult and we'll go through the details, so I don't want to overly finalize it, but we intend to provide it in a way where the investment itself, the actual amount of money, is protected. It's something consistent to buying a government bond, but has the upside, the additional return when these projects realize their potential.
So there you're hearing the Prime Minister essentially explaining that there will be no gatekeeping of regular Canadians being able to invest into this fund.
Like, that's not always a good thing. Like, there was gatekeeping to stop average investors from entering the subprime, like from being able to invest in like subprime mortgages or like the subprime funds, because the risk was considered too high to let ordinary investors do that. Now, when you let the ordinary investors do that, which is what they eventually did, that's when you could have a lot of problems. And there could be some really twisted incentive structures that are built there. But I guess, like, it all depends on how it's structured and how it's set up. Like, sovereign wealth funds have done well. Like, there's been examples of it done well. And it being, like, net positive to a country. So, like, he's clearly, they brought up Norway a couple times. Like, they're clearly looking at a specific model and trying to replicate it. Now, replicate Finland's housing as well, you know? I'd like that. We'll take the sovereign wealth fund idea from Norway, the housing system from Finland. I mean, that's how you build a good country.
Fund. And we also heard from the finance minister today, François-Philippe Champagne, making the rounds before the spring economic update tomorrow, seeming really enthusiastic about this idea the government has.
This is a new tool in our toolkit to make sure that collectively we build our nation, collectively we benefit from the returns, and collectively we can all invest if we want to alongside to build our nation.
Now, though both Champagne and Carney said we will hear a few more details tomorrow, they've also made it clear that there are some questions the government itself is still looking for answers to, such as the exact parameters of how Canadians will be able to invest. They said that they will be consulting with experts on the matter. And we also heard...
Starting to sound like they don't really have it all set up. They're in the initial stages. They're hinting that tomorrow's spring economic statement will be good to essentially prove that they could spend this money. Which, I mean, that excites me. I mean, our country being fiscally responsible is good. We haven't had that in a while. But I guess we'll probably see more about that tomorrow.
Today that these projects that the fund will be financing are not necessarily the big nation-building projects that the government needs to legislatively get through, right? So last year they enacted this new law that is supposed to get faster approvals for projects the government deems in the national interest. Today, Carney said that those are not the only projects this fund can kick money towards.
Yeah, I mean, you'd want it to have wider access, right? As long as you set the criteria for it well, which is what it looks like they're doing, then giving it more room to be able to accomplish that. Like, just investing into the specific things the government allows you to. Like, odds are, let's look at something like AI. I don't know if the government is gonna push AI, but the private sector certainly. And there's a lot going on in that, and so investing into some kind of domestic AI industry would probably be really good. But you want to do that without causing the same because in the US there's so much pushback. Data centers specifically, which are the heart of the AI bubble. But like, you can do data centers responsibly. They don't have to be put beside a residential district in a city. It just so happens that the city currently has the electrical infrastructure to support it, which is why they're there. I think we should be building something like that out on a larger basis somewhere. Okay, well, I guess I certainly am not going to be the one to decide how the 25 billion spent. So let's continue.
Okay, and Rafi, you were also tracking another big political story today. The newly minted Advisory Committee on Canada-U.S. Economic Relations. It is meeting today for the very first time. Some additional names have been tapped to join this group. What can we expect at this inaugural meeting?
I mean, this is the group that's in charge of looking at the future of the Canada-U.S. relationship. And of course, that relationship has been rocky for over a year now with the trade disputes.
Yeah, but like, Trump's not permanent. Don't treat him as a permanent feature of the American system. Like, as far as I understand, like, isn't his approval rating horrible right now? Like, that means most Americans don't agree with him, right? As of today, shows 39% of Americans approve of what he's doing, and the majority, so 57.7, disapprove. Like, that means there's going to be change again in the American system pretty soon. Like, I don't know how much midterms change things, but like, next election, he's not there permanently. But I understand the whole, you have to assume, like, there were Mood-Hawley tariffs. I don't know, way back then, where they did this before. Like, this is a cycle that does happen in the US. You do have to prepare for this turn inwards that happens, and tariffs. And so diversifying is good. I mean, pretty much that simple. So currently, Mark Carney's, I don't know, like, I feel like he's taking a more hostile attitude towards the US. And this might be a negotiating tactic because of the Kuzma renegotiations coming up. And so I imagine both sides are currently essentially trying to build their hands for the negotiation. I don't really understand the see if I can find what I was looking at earlier. Somewhere. Was it the last one? Yeah. Carney's declaration, America is now a weakness. Prime Minister released a video this week that the U.S. has fundamentally changed its approach to trade. I should look into this one as well. Do that one.
It's ongoing between this government and the White House. There was a little bit of a shakeup in the group last week, and are some new names like former Conservative leader Erin O'Toole, a former Conservative cabinet minister Lisa Raitt, as well as the chair of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce Candice Lang. We saw some names removed as well. Think of former Alberta NDP Premier Rachel Notley, former Labour leader Hassan.
At least they appear to be talking now. For the longest time, there was just no movement on the Canada-U.S. trade. Like they weren't talking about it at all.
Yusuf. Now, this committee in its new configuration is meeting today, just about a couple of months ahead of a projected deadline for
Okay, but I
Canada.
think we're getting off topic.
You need to actually have.
I want to look at the sovereign wealth fund. Okay, so liberal slush fund.
You need to actually have wealth for
Let's see what Pierre Poilievre says about it.
a sovereign wealth fund. What this Liberal Prime Minister is proposing to do is use the credit card in order to take $25 billion and put it into a liberal slush fund, Mr. Speaker.
I mean, we don't know that until tomorrow when we get the economic data. If he's funding this with debt, I don't like that. I think you should focus on trying to provide a surplus before you go into like investing. But then he's a banker. Maybe taking out debt and investing is how it's done. Let's continue. What you gotta say?
This after the Liberal government doubled the debt and gave us the worst inflation in 40 years. This Prime Minister...
What is our... It's not debt to GDP ratio. It's once you include assets. What is Canada's... You're gonna give me a problem with this too, huh? You know what I probably gotta do? Go to sounds. Probably. Trying to listen to that mic, aren't you? What is Canada's debt to GDP ratio once you take in the assets of the federal government? GDP ratio. There's a specific word for it, but it's escaping me right now. It's okay, I got out of thinking mode. It's gonna continue.
is spending more taxes, more costs, more of the same. Will he put it all on the nation's credit card again tomorrow?
The Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, let me help the Leader of the Opposition. After all, it's Monday. Let me help him, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the International Monetary Fund just said last week that Canada has the strongest fiscal position of the G7. Mr. Speaker.
What?
Mr. Speaker, the strongest fiscal fund just said last week that Mr. Speaker, the International Monetary Fund just said last week.
International Monetary Fund said that
Canada is the strongest fiscal position of the G7.
Canada is in the strongest fiscal position of the G7. Current ratio 42.4%. Okay, what is it called? Net. When discussing Canada's debt, net of assets, there are two primary measurements used by the government and economists depending on which assets you include. Okay, federal debt. This is the most common metric used in Canada federal budget. It represents the government's total liabilities minus all assets. Yeah. Minus all assets. Current ratio is 42.4. Like, I mean, it's not bad. I think it's 70%. Once this gets over 70%, you start to see real negative growth in the economy. Like That's when it starts to become a real pressure. 42.4, like, it's not good, but it's not horrible. Net debt. This measure used by specific Canada and the IMF for international comparison represents total liabilities minus financial assets. It does not subtract the value of non-financial assets like government buildings or equipment. Current ratio 31.1%. Key comparisons, metric. Okay. While the federal debt to GDP ratio has increased since 2020, it remains one of the lowest among G7 nations when measured on a net debt basis. Net debt. Okay, let me get the words I'm looking for again.
Canada's the strongest fiscal position of the G7.
International monetary.
International monetary.
I hear that the International Monetary Fund has stated that Canada is in the best fiscal position of the G7. Can you go into more detail for me?
Fund just said last week that Canada is the strongest fiscal position of the G7. Mr. Speaker, the Canadian economy has the second fastest growth in the G7, growing almost as twice as the one in Germany, almost twice as much as Japan, almost 3 times as our colleagues in Italy, Mr. Speaker. Canadian economy is strong, Mr. Speaker. We're going to build Canada strong together. We're going to have our Canada Strong Fund. Canadians will benefit.
The Honourable Leader.
Like, I can see both positions. Like, I like this idea of a sovereign. Sorry, I'm just looking down at the golden maze. Like, you still see really weird hangovers from because the whole system was built based off the British system, and so the House of Lords in the British system still has a lot of things like this, like a golden mace. I wonder if it serves any purpose. Like, is it raised at any point? Okay. I mean, I can see both sides of the argument. If they're saying we're in a strong monetary position, then now would be the time to create a fund like this. But the issue you have is that if you're creating this fund, you're not using that money to, like, build houses. You're using it to invest into, like, a railway, or a pipeline. But, like, these could be good investments. But we are in a housing crisis in the country. Cost of living crisis. There's a lot of things I'd like to see him tackle before this, even though I would consider this generally a good thing at the current stage. Like, we don't have details yet. It does depend on the details.
The opposition.
Prime Minister can't answer questions in the House of Commons because he's been wrong on every single major economic issue of our time. And the results are what Canadians are paying for now. More costs, more debt, more taxes, more of the same. In fact, this Prime Minister has given Canada the worst food inflation in the G7, the worst household debt in the G7, the worst housing costs in the G7, the second highest unemployment in the G7.
I mean, like, he's just lining out the negatives that have come.
Tomorrow, he intends to put it all on the national credit card. Trudeau had a $31 billion deficit left over for this year. Will he break through that limit and put that on the national credit card as well?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
We're
Mr. Speaker, inflation has been in the Bank of Canada's target zone and has been for some time, but we are continuously intrigued by this notion about inflationary spending. So we just want to ask and have him answer with absolute clarity, the Leader of the Opposition. Is it the Canada Child Benefit that is inflationary? Is it the Canada Disability Benefit? Is it the Canadian Dental Care Plan? Is it the Groceries and Essentials Benefit? Is it old age security? Exactly what is inflationary spending in the eyes of the Leader of the Opposition?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I don't watch enough of this. Look at these people that just have to like, oh, it's flipping to someone else. We have to stand up now. Like, what is their function? What about these guys?
Well, I'm glad he asked because I got some direct answers. This is how you answer a question. What is inflationary spending? $90 billion for the wasteful Alto project. $1 billion for a gun grab that the public safety minister admits will not stop crime. $20 billion.
Yeah, like that gun stuff. Like, I can understand that you put new laws in place for weapons, and then, like, you can't sell a certain type of weapon, but then they're trying to go back and get people that have these weapons to bring their weapons back in. I think you make your laws, you change it so that, like, people can't acquire this weapon anymore, and then you just use that going forward. Trying to go in and take something that people have already acquired, like, you're going to get so much pushback from that. You could do voluntary, like a voluntary buyback program, if you really want to get specific types of weapons off the streets, but I don't think you can mandate it like they were trying to.
That's double for consultants. 7% increase in the spending on the national bureaucracy. Over $1 billion in handouts to fake and phony refugees. A 100% increase in spending on corporate welfare. It's all inflationary spending. Will they stop putting it on the national credit card and get rid of it instead?
Even this Leader of the Opposition, it's pretty hard to say that money that hasn't been spent yet is inflationary.
Right.
We have not yet, although we will be building high-speed rail as part of our plan to build Canada strong, Mr. Speaker.
I honestly think that in most Western nations, a high-speed rail is not profitable. What you get from it is not worth the cost. Like, in places like China, the government can just kind of come in, displace people, and be like, okay, this building has to be moved because we need to build a rail through here. And they could just kind of displace people like that. They build a new building. They can do it for pretty cheap. Here, like, property rights are such a thing, and it's so hard to build a rail through everything. And given how large our country is, and I mean, relatively not very dense, it's usually more cost efficient to do flights. Like, any money you'd put into high-speed rail, putting it into lowering like air traffic costs is usually just better. Like, you look at what's happened in California. They were building a high-speed rail between a couple of their cities in California. Project went way over budget, and it didn't even connect to where they wanted it to. Like, you can take it to outside of the cities. Like, what's the point of that? It was supposed to take you to the city, not to like the outskirts of the city. I would largely consider that project a disaster. And that's the closest model we have for high-speed rail in Canada. It doesn't look like it would go well. I would like to see different things done with that money.
But let me keep going on the list. The Canada Workers Benefit, is that inflationary spending? Is it the National School Food Program? Is it Canada's student loans? What exactly, in the eyes of the Leader of the Opposition, is inflationary spending? Will he take it?
Okay, I actually kind of like that debate section.
What?
Like, the fact that Mark Carney isn't arguing for it, and he's got like a finance minister or someone out there, I don't really like that, but you did hear his take on it. I am excited for this. I want to learn about Norway's, because they brought it up clearly. Okay, Bloomberg Television or Logically Answered. Let's try Logically Answered.
Have you ever wondered why Social Security is absolute garbage?
Okay, so I'm going to look into the Norway 1.4 trillion wealth fund, because it's clearly what they're trying to imitate with this. So let's see how this
Every year they
works
collect
for them.
12.4% of everybody's income up to $18,000. Yet they're projected to fall short of their payouts by 2034. Some people blame it on the pandemic, others blame it on bureaucracy, and others suggest that it's simply a side effect of people living longer than ever before. While all of these are valid points, none of these are the fundamental problem with Social Security. You see,
Why has he jumped into that? He hasn't even explained. Let's try this one. Explain to me what it is first.
This is Norway, one of the wealthiest countries in the world and also the world's largest investor. Its sovereign wealth fund has a massive value of $1.4 trillion, invested across 69 countries and thousands of individual companies. Seriously, the latest holdings report has 398 pages of just an endless list of company names and their ownership percentage. In total, it owns 1.5% of all of the public companies on Earth.
Whoa.
Not to mention, it owns hundreds of buildings in the world's major cities like New York, London, Berlin, and Tokyo. This is very impressive.
I mean, like, hopefully that's not office space. Because the price of office space just absolutely collapsed, from my understanding.
Considering that 25 years ago, the fund only had a value of $300 million, with every single cent invested into low-yielding government bonds. And the country has successfully turned oil, which has long been described as a curse to the nations owning it, into a blessing that enriches both its current and future generations.
Yeah, it's crazy how oil can be seen as a curse when it, like something that's so valuable for a nation to have. What is that? Does this building come up and then hang over a little green area here? I mean, why not?
But the journey is
hopefully you don't live in that little spot that hangs over, because I would be concerned.
Far from being smooth. In the 1980s, mismanagement of the oil revenues along with several bad economic policies caused overheating of the Norwegian economy. Inflation peaked at around 13% in 1981, and then the nation fell into a banking crisis in 1988. Meanwhile, the fund itself was widely...
It is kind of wild that there's almost always a crisis and then the correction. Like, you almost need a crisis in order to fix the system. It just seems to be how it works.
Criticized when it increased its equity allocation from 40 to 60% in 2007, right before the global financial crisis. Despite that, the fund performed better than most institutional investors during that period and has more than doubled in value since 2010. It also brought an immensely valuable safety net for Norwegians, $250,000 for every single person, which I am jealous of. And all of this has been...
So the Canadian one was specifically for Canadian projects, right? Like it was an investment fund to invest into Canadian projects. This is an investment fund that has just full access to all of the markets. Like they're saying buildings in other countries and stuff like that, which I mean, probably profitable. What did they say? Doubled since 2010. So I mean, they're doing well.
Achieve while maintaining extreme transparency, good corporate governance, and ethical and responsible investing, making it the most successful and likable fund. So in this video, we'll talk about 3 things. We'll briefly discuss about the Norwegian economy before the fund's creation and how Norway turned the oil curse into a blessing. We'll examine how the fund is organized and managed, its investment philosophy, asset allocation, that kind of things. And we'll talk about how this massive fund benefits the economy at large. Norway's economic success probably started in 1969, when the American oil company Phillips Petroleum discovered lots of oil over the Norwegian continental shelf at Ekofisk field, the largest oil field in Norway measured by production, with many more oil fields discovered ever since.
I mean, here in Canada, we're sitting on the 3rd largest oil reserve? From what I understand, it's not easy to access like some other oil, but still like a terrifying amount of oil.
Then the state immediately established a petroleum tax that guaranteed the oil resources found in the seabed would remain public property.
That is something that you gotta do. Like the wealth of the nation does need to be like brought back into the government, because oil can be so profitable that you gotta be careful how you allocate the money from it. I think there should definitely be high taxes on oil, but I also think you should be expanding the oil sector in Canada. And you saw when we read the summary earlier, they did say conventional energy. That's oil. So it does look like the fund will be allowed to invest that way,
keeping the new fund,
which I hope they can,
on wealth in the citizens' hands. Suddenly, the nation became filthy rich, and you might think that's the end of the story. But like many other countries that
so many countries that get a boost of income from a resource that they find go through the resource curse, where they find the resource, they get a bunch of money, so they bring the standard of living up, match the amount of money they're getting now, and then the resource either becomes less valuable, it starts to run out, the price of it eventually goes down, and if you've been living basically like you're a person living at your means, eventually the means go down, and that's when you start to see a lot of issues show up, because everything in the society will have been built based off the current value or even a projected higher value, and that's dangerous. I had asked this a question. Can I ever get back to that? My chat. Okay, I lost my train of thought. Let's keep going.
Suddenly had much wealth, it made the same mistake as everyone else did, spending too much oil money too fast. This was worsened by credit liberalization in the early 1980s, while interest rates were at significantly below market level, causing the economy to overheat along with double-digit inflation. This all continued until 1986, when oil prices collapsed, trade surpluses suddenly became huge deficits, credit began to freeze, and banks began to fail. All of this triggered the 1988 to 1992 Norwegian banking crisis. Until 1990, Norway spent all of its oil revenues, mostly reinvesting it back to the oil industry. But something had to change. So in 1990, Norway created the Norwegian Petroleum Fund, or otherwise known as the Oil Fund, to invest its revenues abroad. Now, there are two main reasons why the Sovereign Wealth Fund was created. First, the country wanted to turn oil, which is a finite resource, into a sustainable revenue source for future generations.
And the Sovereign Wealth Fund is a good way to do it.
Moreover, it wanted to avoid the boom and bust cycles caused by volatile commodity prices. The country learned this the hard way when oil prices collapsed in 1986, dragging the economy along with it. Second, it wanted to avoid the Dutch disease, when sudden inflows of foreign currency on one industry caused the national currency to appreciate, causing exports to become more expensive for other countries to buy, which reduced competitiveness in other industries like manufacturing or agriculture, resulting in deindustrialization. This is exactly what happened to the Netherlands after it found the largest natural gas field in Europe, hence the name. The oil fund solved both of these problems, as investing in securities outside of the oil sector provides diversification benefits that the nation desperately needed. And by investing in foreign assets, the country could slowly absorb the oil revenue, instead of all at once, avoiding the Dutch disease and saving the revenues for...
I mean, that's a nice looking place. Where is this? Like, talk about living on the water. Look at all that waterfront property that's just buildings directly to water.
Future generations. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is key to Norway's economic success, as many resource-rich countries actually became poorer than before natural resources were discovered.
Yeah, like that's crazy. A sovereign wealth fund where you put the wealth from the resources into like a long-term investment. We see Saudi Arabia right now trying to do this. They're building essentially mega projects. Their goal isn't like a sovereign wealth fund where they're investing into like foreign companies. They're investing into like resorts or like the Line project, the mega city, like things that would draw in like foreign capital essentially. So it's similar to a sovereign wealth fund, but I think the sovereign wealth fund is a much easier way of doing that. They're trying a much more complicated way, and I guess we'll see if it works out for them. Like right now, that whole area is in a war, so there's not a lot of foreign capital going there. But assuming we get to peace and these things are constructed, they might be successful. We'll see.
Unlike other countries though, Norway learned from its mistakes and began thinking about the future, rather than rushing to use its oil money immediately.
Didn't they just say there was a crisis? Like, they did rush to use their oil money immediately, but they've learned.
This is the kind of long-term thinking that we desperately need in politics. Now,
I'm hoping that our government learns too.
Now, the fund is obviously the most successful sovereign wealth fund in the world, and it made Norway one of the world's richest countries. But how does the fund actually work? The GPFG, or Government Pension Fund Global, is administered by the Ministry of Finance, which sets the fund's goals, regulations, and strategies. But the fund itself is operated by Norges Bank, the Norwegian central bank. Now, unlike its name, the fund is not a pension fund. The assets inside the fund aren't used for a specific purpose like providing for retirement or healthcare, although it could if the government wants to. So, no person or organization has a direct claim on them. Instead, the fund is used by directly transferring the money into the state budget, which then flows right into the Norwegian economy. To sustain the fund's value, the finance ministry limits.
That's a cool building. What are these people all doing today? What's the purpose of this area? Like, literally just to stand there and take pictures?
Withdrawal from the fund at 4% annually, because 4% is the long-term expected return of the fund. You might have heard of the 4% rule if you're into early retirement. The concept is similar to that. In 2017, they revised this to 3% because the fund was getting bigger. This arrangement is pretty flexible though. In good times when tax revenues are high, like in the early 2000s, less than 4% of the fund will be transferred to the state budget. In bad times like late 2008 or early 2020, more than 4% of the fund will flow to the economy to minimize the economic damage.
So, they have a sovereign wealth fund, and 4% of it a year. So you assume it grows by like, I don't know, what do you expect returns, like 10% a year on average, right? You take 4% of it and you put that into the national budget. They're down to 3% now because it's gotten bigger. They add that to the national budget, and anything left, like any other growth, is just added to the fund. So then, are they not actively investing into the fund? Wait, let me hear that last little section.
Budget. In bad times like late 2008, like in the early 2000s, less than 4% of the fund will be transferred to the state budget. In bad times like late 2008 or early 2020, more than 4% of the fund will flow to the economy to minimize the economic damage. This is such a valuable safety net for Norwegians, as most countries do not have the luxury of pulling money from a 1.4 trillion oil fund during an economic downturn. In this situation, most countries will likely take on more debt or print more money to provide stimulus, which does work but have damaging side effects.
Yeah, like having the fund just gives you another option. You don't have to take the debt option. And it's the debt option that eventually causes you so many problems.
Therefore, the fund acts as a fiscal policy tool, and a very effective one at that, at least for Norway. Okay, so Norway has massive oil wealth, and it invested that wealth into more wealth that made the nation filthy rich. Pretty simple. But how does the country invest this money? After all, it's pretty much useless if they don't invest it well, and managing a $1.4 trillion fund is far from easy. So, let's look at how the country invests its oil money. The Norway model for investing is characterized by its long-term belief and low management fees. The country wants the fund to be sustainable and to gain a permanent income from it if possible. Coupled with the fact that Norway is a rich country in its...
That's the idea. Use a large-scale but short-term wealth generation. Use that, put it into a fund that then provides consistent returns over time, and then use that to assist the nation rather than trying to spend all of the short-term money. Like it's just good fiscal policy.
And the fund has no outside shareholders, makes it far more tolerant of volatility and short-term capital losses than most investors. This is why 72% of the fund's
if you win the lottery, you don't go out and spend all your money instantly. You put a lot of it probably into the market where it can continue to get you returns so it can fund the rest of your life, right? And The people that go out and spend it all instantly, those are the crash outs you hear about.
Portfolio is concentrated in equity, which is pretty insane if you think about it. But this wasn't always the case. Before 1996, the fund pretty much invested exclusively in government bonds, which were expanded to a 40% equity and 60% debt allocation. In 2007, the fund decided to primarily invest in stocks, 60% of the total portfolio. At the time, this was widely criticized because 2008 was a bad year for investors, including Norway's oil fund, which was down over 20%. But in 2009, it recouped all of its losses with a 25.9% return, which is the fund's largest return in a single year. Other than stocks, 25% of the fund is invested in fixed income assets, comprised of government and corporate bonds. Another 2.5% is invested in real estate. The fund first entered the real estate market in 2010, when it acquired 25% of the Crown Estate's properties in Regent Street in London. Since then, the fund has purchased properties in countries like Germany and Switzerland. It also entered the US real estate market in 2013, making investment in New York, Washington DC, and Boston. In 2017, it entered the Asian real estate market starting in Tokyo. Also recently, the fund has invested in renewable energy, but this makes up for less than 0.1% of the portfolio. If you notice, Norway uses a simple but peculiar strategy. Usually when you look at institutional investors, you will see a significant part of the portfolio dedicated to exotic assets, like private equity for large returns or gold as an inflation hedge. The reason Norway doesn't invest in these is because its size is too big for private equity investments to add meaningful value, and it doesn't really need an inflation hedge as long as it still has lots of oil under the sea. For the fund, deflation is far more worrying than inflation. Okay, so 70% of the whole 1.4 trillion portfolio is invested in stocks. But what kind of stocks? The fund has over 9,000 stocks in 69 different countries for diversification, so it's hard to truly explain this in a video. But roughly, the equity index comprises of 50% European stocks, excluding Norway, 35% American, Middle East, and African stocks, and the remaining 15% are invested in Asian and Oceanian stocks. Some of the biggest names I found include Apple, Amazon, Unilever, Microsoft, and Visa. I'll link the full report in the description. For fixed income assets, roughly 60% are European, 35% US and Canada, with 5% Asian and Oceanian assets. Now, you might wonder why most of the investments are concentrated in Europe. This is partly because of currency reasons. All investments are unhedged and the Norwegian kroner exchange rates have in the past been less volatile against European currencies than against non-European currencies. The fund also has some strict ethical standards. In August 2020, for example, it excluded India's Page Industries, a manufacturing company that had reports of human rights violation in one of its factories. And the fund excluded 4 Canadian oil and gas companies: Canadian Natural Resources, Cenovus Energy, Suncor Energy, and Imperial Oil, that produces too much greenhouse gas emissions. Companies that control assets or receive more than 30% of their income from thermal coal will also be excluded from the fund. Norway has been a lucky country. It found large amounts of oil right before oil prices soar. But what differentiates Norway from other resourceful countries are its long-term thinking and prudent management, which
that it didn't have in the beginning, that it acquired after a crisis. But it did get there, and it does work.
Fortunately, not many countries have. And its massive sovereign wealth fund is key to understanding how Norway is so successful. Now, a country that has tried its best to instill this long-term thinking and prudent management is China. But so far, it has not been successful as a massive property bubble emerged and became a full-blown property market meltdown.
That was pretty good. Their fund clearly has far more leeway into what to invest into. The Canadian fund sounded like it was going to be specifically for Canadian investment, like to invest into the Canadian sector. I think that's better, but I don't know. Like you need to fund the funding a factory in your own country will provide more economic benefits than funding a factory just somewhere else in Europe, right? For your own country. Because it provides jobs, provides spending, like it advances the economy in your own country. But limiting it to just Canada will limit the growth of the fund. Like the one that we just saw in Norway has access and can clearly invest into all of Europe or pretty much all the world, because they had Asia. They were even involved in Tokyo real estate. They were able to invest anywhere. So that allows you to get better returns. But I don't think the idea of this specific fund is essentially to get the returns. It's to get the infrastructure projects built in Canada. I don't know. I think it's a good idea. It does come down to the details for me. And we'll see the economic statement tomorrow. Oh, that's the question I was asking. Well, fund. How to phrase this? Did I ask this one? Ooh, yes, right here. This is what I was looking for. So, the International Monetary Fund has stated that Canada is in the best fiscal position of the G7. Can you go into more detail for me? All right, here we go. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has consistently ranked Canada as having the strongest fiscal outlook in the G7, primarily due to its low net debt to GDP ratio. That's what we were looking at, net debt to GDP, like 41% or something. And its relative growth prospects. From my understanding, growth is really low, but there are good growth prospects. While domestic headlines often focus on rising gross debt or deficits, the IMF looks at the broader balance sheet. Here is the details behind why they view Canada's position so favorably. The lowest net debt metric. This is the primary reason for the IMF's high ranking. Unlike gross debt, net debt subtracts financial assets like the massive holdings in the Canadian Pension Plan and Quebec Pension Plan from total liabilities. Canada's position. Canada has maintained the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7 for over 2 decades. The numbers. In 2025-2026, Canada's general government net debt is approximately 15 to 16% of GDP. For comparison, the G7 average often exceeds 90%, with countries like the US, UK, and Japan carrying significantly higher net burdens. Canada's general government debt is approximately 15 to 16%. We have a really high household debt in Canada too. But like that, I think a lot of that is housing costs. You go into a mortgage on $1 million house, you got $1 million debt, right? The IMF forecast suggests that Canada is positioned to grow faster than most of its peers. Position. Not that we are. We have second fastest growth for 2026. The IMF projects Canada's economy to grow by roughly 1.5 to 1.9%. This is typically the second fastest in the G7, trailing only the United States and outpacing Germany, Italy, and Japan. Population drivers. This growth is heavily supported by Canada's high population and employment growth rates, which the IMF notes are the highest in the G7. The high population growth is immigration, which the IMF notes is the highest in G7. Okay. The AAA credit rating. Canada is one of the few countries, alongside Germany, that has maintained a AAA credit rating from most major agencies. Borrowing costs. This rating signals to the IMF that Canada's debt is highly sustainable. It allows the government to borrow at lower interest rates than countries with lower ratings. Fiscal buffers. Because the debt to GDP ratio is lower than its peers, the net debt to GDP ratio is lower than its peers. The IMF argues Canada has more fiscal room to respond to unexpected economic shocks, like a tariff war with the US, like a recession or a housing market correction, without risking insolvency. Conservative deficit management. Despite recent increases in spending on infrastructure and defense, the IMF notes that Canada's annual deficit as a percent of GDP remains relatively modest compared to the UK or the US. Fiscal guardrails. The government has largely struck to a fiscal anchor of keeping the federal debt to GDP ratio on a declining path over the medium term, a move the IMF has praised as an effective anchor for market confidence. I mean, that's just keep the federal debt to GDP ratio on a declining path over the medium term. That's just a good idea. I think they were expecting an increase in the short term, but as long as the outlook is you're still pushing the debt to GDP ratio down, like, debt is what gives you. In Norway, they have the sovereign wealth fund that they can use to kind of ride out the bumps in the market, right? Most governments do not have that. They ride out the bumps in the market by debt. They'll use the debt on a downturn, push it up, and then you're supposed to pay the debt off on an upturn, and so it kind of evens out. But for most countries, this continuous use debt and then pay it back is trending downwards. They are losing money over time as the debt gets bigger, and then the requirement to pay the debt, the interest becomes a larger and larger aspect of the budget. Like, what is it? Isn't interest larger than the military budget in the US now? That's you could double your military if you didn't have the debt. And you're not even paying the debt back with this payment. The Trump's big beautiful bill increased deficit spending. The debt is getting larger. And you're spending this much just to service it already. I think that's going to be dangerous there. All right, the fine print. This is the bottom of it. Okay. It is worth noting that the IMF praise focus on the federal and social security levels. They do occasionally flag risks that are unique to Canada. Subnational debt. While the federal government is in great shape, Canadian provinces carry significant debt compared to subnational governments in other G7 countries. Household debt. The IMF often warns that high Canadian household debt, mostly mortgage, is a potential vulnerability that could dampen the growth they are forecasting. In short, the IMF assessment isn't saying Canada is without problems, it's saying that compared to the rest of the G7 neighborhood, Canada has the most solid foundation and the most room to move. We're not saying you're good. We're saying you're the least bad. How does this compare to what you've been hearing about the domestic economy lately? I've been hearing negative things about the domestic economy, but the government appears to be in a decent fiscal position. Provinces, large amounts of debt. I hear that provinces are in a large amount of debt in Canada. What provinces are under the most strain, and what are their approximate debt amounts? Let's go. Will I listen to something still? No. I gotta post this. Post the video. Listen to Dover Hill. I think that worked. Let me just check. Good. So, YouTube, when I specifically chat through it, doesn't count that as a chat. But when I chat through OBS, it does. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Close. I wanted to look at this. Let's just finish this up. While Canadian federal government has a relatively strong balance sheet, the provinces are indeed under significant pressure because provinces are responsible for the most expensive public service, healthcare, and education. Their debt levels are much higher relative to their revenues than the federal government. As of the 2026 budget cycle, here are the provinces under the most strain based on two key metrics: net debt to GDP, that's the one we like to look at, and absolute debt. Oh, what's up? I will stream whenever you go live because you add me on Discord. I'll look into doing that maybe after the stream. Thanks for checking out. So, the most strained by debt to GDP ratio. The debt to GDP ratio is the best method of fiscal strain because it shows how much of a province's economy output we needed to pay off its debt. Here we go. Newfoundland, 45.6. These aren't that bad. Consistently the highest in Canada. Small population and volatile ARAM make this debt very heavy per capita. Quebec, 38.8. Clearly, provincial debt is treated differently because federal debt, from my understanding, the big no-no number is 70%. Like net debt to GDP, you go over 70%, it starts to massively negatively impact growth within your economy. But they call these high and they're 45, so provinces probably have lower ability to borrow. Manitoba, Ontario. I mean, like, there's a bunch that are right around 30, 38, 37. Massive capital spending on transit and highways is pushing this ratio higher after several years of decline. By absolute amount. Okay, Alberta. Let's have a look here. 51.4 billion despite recent deficits due to softer oil prices. Alberta remains in the strongest position with debt to GDP ratio of only 10.5. That's nice. I would have liked a sovereign wealth fund. Can you create a sovereign provincial fund? For when Like, I don't know, let's just say oil prices spike because maybe there's like a war affecting the oil price, and then we can put that towards a sovereign fund. That way we don't have to use this, and you just use the fund to control the necessary spending. I'm just saying, it worked for Norway. It could work here. Why the strain is increasing in 2026? Provinces are currently caught in a triple squeeze. Yeah. Making their debt harder to manage. The interest bite. As older debts mature, provinces are refining. Oh, so they're going through the same thing households are going through. Low interest rates during COVID. Spend money to solve the problem. And the interest rates go up, and then all of a sudden you have to deal with the money you spent. Now there's consequences. Population growth. Rapid population growth has forced provinces like Ontario, BC, and Alberta to spend billions on new schools, hospitals, and transit to keep up with demand. That just happens with the population expansion, right? As your population, I don't know if it's gonna keep growing. Tell you the truth, like there's this new push to lower the mass immigration, essentially. And we see the immigration rates coming back down to something more sustainable. And the fertility rate in Canada is going way down. Like, if you bring the immigration rates back to something normal, you'll probably see, I mean, I don't know if you'll see population shrinking, but I don't think we'll see the same population growth that we've seen in the past. Which means we won't have to spend more to expand schools, hospitals, and transit. Healthcare costs and aging population is naturally driving up the cost of single largest item in every provincial budget. That's going to keep happening. Like, we need the robots that do the surgeries. Like, where are we at with that? I saw they're coming along. Like, this is not far off. Where you're probably better off having a robot do it than a person. But I mean, like, 15 years away. But I mean, hopefully that lowers the cost of healthcare, which is the biggest provincial budget. Even then, like, none of these are like unfixable. Okay, what was the other one it was talking about? Household budgets, right? What's the average household debt in Canada? I'm gonna see if I can't get a chart for this. This one ooh, trading economics. I love this study. How do I go back 10 years? Ooh. Okay. What are we looking at? Household debt in Canada increased to GDP in the fourth quarter. So this is total household debt. the issue is here, like when we look at the federal government, we do net debt, right? So do we want to look at net debt? Because like a lot of this debt is offset on your balance sheet by the house asset, right? You have debt, you have your mortgage, which is the primary debt, but then you have your house, which is worth that. Let's see what the AI says. The average household debt in Canada has reached a significant milestone in early 2026. So it has, like, this was the pandemic, right? We had a massive increase in debt. I think that's because money went cheap, right? Interest rates dropped, money went cheap, borrowing became easy, people borrowed. Simple incentives. Money became more expensive, borrowing dropped. Sitting at over 100, which I mean is not good from my understanding. Okay, the big picture numbers. Average total debt per household approximately 176,000 to 180,000 Canadian. This includes everything from mortgages and car loans to credit card balances. Total national household debt roughly 2.65 trillion Canadian. That's a lot of debt. Debt to disposable income ratio. That one sounds important. 176.9. This means that for every $1 of disposable income a Canadian household earns, they owe roughly 1.77 in debt. So yeah, because people don't make that much a year, right? The average income. So for every dollar you make in a year, you would owe 1.77 of that in debt. Well, this has stabilized slightly from the peak of previous years. It remains among the highest in the G. Like, this is the cost of living crisis, right? This is where you see it. Breakdown by debt type. Debt isn't distributed evenly. Most of the weight is in housing. Yep. But consumer debt is where many families daily. So mortgages. Ooh. Non-mortgage, just consumer debt. Average amount per household. Per household with this debt. So this isn't. So these are people that have this type of debt. Like I don't have credit card debt. My credit card gets paid off the moment I use it, so that they don't charge me interest. The bastard. Mortgage, non-mortgage consumer. This includes credit cards, auto loans, and lines of credit. So if you have this type of debt, then you're on average 23,000. Like, that sucks. A lot of money to be behind. And like, this is the kind of debt where your credit card, your auto loans, your lines of credit. Well, I don't know about lines of credit, but credit cards and auto loans, like that's the high interest types of debt. Like mortgages, you can usually get a decently low rate at. The credit cards, they charge you at the wazoo, man. That's rough. Regional variations. Okay. Summary. While the IMF likes Canada's government's balance sheet, they remain concerned about this household balance sheet. Canada's government is rich, but its citizens are some of the most indebted in the developed world. Does this level of debt align with why you're seeing? That's crazy. So we have a federal government that has good finances. Provinces, like I don't think that was a big problem on a large scale, at least. The household debt, though, like that is kind of scary. If you take out the mortgage, which I mean, when you get a debt for a mortgage, you get an asset for the same thing, or at least you were. Now that asset is it? House prices. 10 years, I mean, like it's still going down. You buy a house right now, you might have to factor that slow decline in. And this is largely from specific areas of the country, like Toronto, where you're seeing the decline. My understanding is that Alberta is still actually seeing price increases, although Calgary might have caught the Toronto virus, the condo virus, or whatever they call it. Okay, I'm gonna move on. I think I've covered this. I guess this is related. We're gonna cut this anyway. All right. Carney's declaration: America is now a weakness. Prime Minister Carney released a video this weekend stating that, I gotta find the video clearly. The U.S. has fundamentally changed its approach to trade, raising its tariffs to levels lasting during the Great Depression, and that Canada's close ties to the U.S. have become weakness that must be corrected. While U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick attacked Canada's China EV deal and called Canada's trade strategy irrational. What's the hook? The Prime Minister just said our relationship with the U.S. is a liability. Do you agree? And what does decoupling actually cost a Canadian family? See the source again. Is this? I want it to be a video of what he actually says. Let's see.
Canada-US trade tensions are heating up again with the CUSMA review deadline fast approaching. Prime Minister Mark Carney now warning the country should prepare for some turbulence ahead.
Many of our former strengths, based on our close ties
Okay, 2 minutes. I'll let it
to America, have become our weaknesses that we must correct.
In a new government-produced video, Carney is renewing his commitment to urgently diversify trade away from the States amid mounting political turmoil south of the border.
We can't bet our future on the hope that it will suddenly stop.
Carney is also relaying for the first time that he draws inspiration from a War of 1812 hero who died defending what is now Canada during that American invasion.
This statue of General Brock that I see every morning in the Prime Minister's office reminds me that when we're united as Canadians, we can withstand anything.
We wouldn't have.
What a tiny statue. Is that all he got? A tiny little statue.
A country.
As I see every morning.
When he said statue, I expected a statue. Not a tiny figurine.
Morning in the Prime Minister's office reminds me that when we're united as Canadians, we can withstand anything.
We wouldn't have a country without Brock.
This historian says invoking...
Then where's his statue? Come on.
Being a figure like Sir Isaac Brock is steeped in symbolism, a reminder that the country has beat the Americans before, despite long odds.
Canada can triumph, the Canada can succeed, but above all else, the Canada is worth fighting for.
Carney's national address comes as the Trump administration ramps up the rhetoric against Canada.
They suck. Look, we are a $30 trillion economy, right? We are the consumer of the world, okay? Carney has a problem with us.
While the U.S. and Mexico have held a series of meetings, there have been no formal talks with Canada in recent months about renewing the trilateral agreement.
We need a tariff-free deal. We need to get these obstacles out of the way.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, meanwhile, is urging Carney to patch things up with the Trump administration, saying the country's economic future depends on it.
He's wrong.
So, like, I largely lean in his direction here. You do have to understand that the Kuzma, from what I understand of it, doesn't end with this negotiation. Like, this is just after 6 years they agreed. After like 4? No, I think it was 6, because it was a 16-year deal. So after 6 years, they like agreed to like come back and look at Kuzma. But it continues. The original deal was signed for 16 years. And so they look at it again after 6, and they hopefully sign it again for 16 more years. But even if they don't, you still have 10 more years, and that's what, 2 different presidents you're going to go through in that time. Assuming Trump just doesn't keep coming for a 3rd term and then a 4th term. Given his current age and polling values, I do not expect that to happen. And so you're looking at least 2 different presidents that you'd get a chance to renegotiate it with. I don't know. When I looked at the specifics of what the Americans didn't like, it all seemed minor. Like, the only thing I didn't really understand was like dairy, cheese and dairy. I don't understand enough of that comment on, but everything else seemed like minor issue, honestly.
To suggest that we can have a permanent rupture with our biggest customer.
I mean, like, by far, we trade the most with the U.S. Still, as much as, you know, we talk about diversification, like around 70% of our trade is still with the U.S. I mean, like, it makes sense. You can drive a truck across the border and trade. The same way you could trade between provinces, and in a lot of cases, trading to the U.S. was actually easier than trading between provinces. So it makes up a significant part of the economy.
Taking inspiration from a wartime general who battled the Americans, the Prime Minister is still trying to bring about peace on the trade front. His point person on Canada-US relations, Minister Dominic LeBlanc, says bilateral conversations are happening behind the scenes, telling MPs late last week it's been a challenge to come to an agreement.
And break down why this has been a challenge. What are the sticking points?
I mean, this is kind of what Trump does, right? He's not gonna just sign the deal. Like, he's gonna drag it out. He's gonna use his negotiating tactics. I don't know if we'll even see a deal, like a new deal signed right away. I expect it'll just keep getting dragged out for a while yet. I imagine, like, he'll be pushed to, I don't know, because I could see, kind of depends on what goes on in Iran too. Like, if that strait is continued to be choked with oil, then he needs to like steady the oil market, and Canada is one of the bigger suppliers of oil. And so I could see them coming to a deal with that pressure in some way. But knowing Trump, he's going to drag it out time. And knowing Trump, he's going to drag it out for a long time. You're going to end up with a deal that's basically the same, and he'll call it a win.
Well, the Trump administration is committed to those punishing tariffs on steel, autos, and lumber. Canada, in turn, is digging in on supply management, protecting the cultural sector, and that boycott on U.S. beer, wine, and spirits. American officials say finishing the...
Like, that boycott was largely a provincial thing that's happened in response to steel and aluminum tariffs, from my understanding. And so these are things that, like, could just be negotiated away. Okay, let me hear all of his sticking points.
Cultural sector, and that boycott on U.S. beer, wine, and spirits. American officials say finishing the CUSMA review by July 1st is increasingly unlikely. Ian?
Cheap.
Of course it is. There's no way they're gonna finish the review on time. Like, that's just how it's gonna be. Okay, so I've been hearing about the CUSMA review. What exactly is up for review? I thought the original deal went on for 16 years. CUSMA review exactly is up for review? Question mark. Years. Let's see if it can give us a little bit more. I also want to look at. Let's see what we got. Why MAGA's view on Canada should derail CUSMA negotiations. Whoa. Oh, 20 minutes. I'm very confident ahead of CUSMA negotiations. Okay. Advisory committee launches ahead of CUSMA review. That sounds interesting. 1 day ago. The deadline is a lie. Here's the legal proof. Yeah, like, they say there's a deadline. It's not really a deadline. They'll just continue to negotiate as long as, like, trying to get them in a room negotiating is hard, so you put a deadline in there. They ain't gonna get things done by the deadline. Canada fights back on steel, Trump's CUSMA trap, and what it means for 1,000 jobs. Okay. Canada current. What's the latest with CUSMA? Get insight. Okay, I don't know what any of these news sites. Kinda hoping. Like a CNN, BBC. See what we can find. Trump claims he'll let CUSMA expire. That couldn't happen. That couldn't happen until 2026. Yeah. Are Canada-U.S. relations at a standstill until CUSMA review talk? Okay, let's hear this one.
Now,
How old is it? 4 months. Holy crap! They've been at this for a long time. That's old news. Where was I? Here we go. I've been hearing about the Kuzma review. Okay. The deal runs 16 years, but there's a built-in review mechanism that's now kicking in. Here's the full picture. The sunset clause explained. When Kuzma entered into force on July 1st, 2020, it introduced a novel sunset clause, mandating a joint review every 6 years. This requires the 3 countries to confirm whether they wish to extend the agreement for an additional 16 years. If all parties unanimously agree, Kuzma is extended until 2042, with subsequent review every 6 years. If one or more parties do not confirm a desire to extend, joint reviews will be held annually for the remainder of the term, which would expire July 1st, 2036. I could easily see parties do not confirm a desire to extend. I could easily see Trump stating that he doesn't want to extend because the joint review will be held annually. This seems like something he would like to go through annually for some reason. But who knows? We'll see. Either way, the actual Kuzma expires July 1st, 2036. So, about 10 years away. So the 16-year expiry is still the endpoint, but this review at the 6-year mark is the first checkpoint to decide whether to lock in a fresh 16-year extension. If you don't lock in a 16-year extension, then there is annual reviews where you can lock in a 16-year extension. The 3 possible outcomes. Let's have a look. It boils down to a 3-way choice for the 3 countries. Renew the deal for another 16 years, withdraw from it, or sign or signal both non-renewal and non-withdrawal, which triggers an annual review that keeps negotiations going indefinitely. I don't see any of the countries withdrawing from it. The thing is, when you created the Kuzma deal, you encouraged so much trade between the countries that withdrawing from it has a massive effect. A complete withdrawal from the Kuzma deal will be a shock. It'd be a horrible shock for Canada. It would also be a massive shock for the US. I do think Canada would feel the brunt of that, given how much our trade goes south. But I don't think anyone's going to withdraw from it. I think Trump is looking for concessions on it. But Trump was the one who negotiated the original Kuzma, right? Back in his last term. So the free trade was beneficial to him, and it is beneficial to the United States. The thing with trade is that generally it is beneficial to both parties. Now, there are exceptions, just complete free trade. There will definitely be negatives that you'll see. For example, the entire industrial sector going to China because of cheap labor. Free and open trade did that. There are negatives, but generally both sides, at least if they're near equal in standard of living, I guess you'd say, you generally see positive effects from trade. from open trade. This is why Canada explores. It's trying to at least explore free trade with Europe or the EU. From my understanding, they're trying to expand into that. Which I think is a good idea. Let's continue. What's actually being reviewed? This isn't a full renegotiation, but the US has made clear what it wants from Canada. The main sticking points the Americans are pushing include... Okay, here we go. Another increase to the regional value content required for vehicles and auto parts produced in North America. Opening up Canada's dairy and egg supply management system. That's the thing I have no idea about. Dairy and egg supply management system? What? Like, why you care about that so much? I think we do pretty good with dairy and eggs here. Like, I don't think they're as cheap as in the US, but I don't know. To more US imports and changing or removing the Online News Act along with other concessions relating to digital services. Online News Act. I'm gonna look that one up. Yeah, requirements for vehicles and auto parts produced in North America. Trump has also complained about the alleged subsidization of the softwood lumber sector and other non-tariff barriers, and U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer has raised issue with Canada's digital service tax and provincial bans on American alcohol sales. The timeline and Canadians' preparations. The review must be completed by July 1st, 2026. Prepare Prime Minister. Review must be completed. Huh. All that does is put it into another review the next year. Then continuously. To prepare, Prime Minister Carney announced a new 24-member advisory committee on Canada-US economic relations on April 21st. 2026. What do we know? Bottom line, it's a high stakes checkpoint, not a full renegotiation, but with Trump's aggressive trade posture, it could easily become one. High stakes checkpoint. Okay. What is the Online News Act? They were bringing this up. The Online News Act, also known as Bill C-18, is a Canadian law that came into force in 2023. Here's a breakdown of what it is and why it matters. What it does. The Online News Act requires large digital platforms, primarily Google and Meta, to negotiate and pay Canadian news outlets for the news content that appears on their platforms. The idea is that when people share or find news articles through these platforms, the platforms profit from the engagement, but the news publishers who create the content see little of that revenue. This gets into the whole, like, a lot of news agencies, like the big ones, are experiencing like financial distress because they used to have people buying newspapers and buying subscriptions and stuff to their service, and we just see a lot less of that right now. I don't think this is necessarily bad, but I think it sets a specific type of standard. Like, if you use the news I mean, I guess I don't know the specifics. let's keep reading. I'm gonna save my whole decision on this for the end. The logic behind it. Canada's news industry, especially local newspapers, has been in financial freefall for years as advertising dollars shift from traditional media to Google and Facebook. I mean, it's just better to get me. That's how I get my news. Mostly. The act was designed to force a redistribution of some of that revenue back to Canadian journalism, helping to sustain local and independent news organizations. Is this the way to do it, though? What happened after it passed? The law triggered a fierce response from the platforms. Meta chose to block all news content for Canada's users on Facebook and Instagram entirely, meaning Canadians couldn't share or see news links on those platforms at all. Google initially threatened to do the same, but eventually reached a deal, agreeing to pay approximately $100 million per year to Canadian news publishers. I think Google did it the right way. Like, trying to pay for like something that the model you want to use is like how a show is licensed to be put on somewhere like Netflix, for example. Like, you own the rights to a show, you want to license it to put it onto one, and so you get a specific amount of money per year to do that. This is so much easier than trying to set up you would need like a content review system. Be like, oh, this is a video that featured news from this news outlet, so this amount of revenue goes to this news outlet. There's so much complicated there that you're going to get a lot of stuff to go wrong. So not only are you going to have a whole team to do this, you're then going to have people employed that their job is to look at the problems. Oh, this person's reporting they're not getting this, you got to look into this. Just lump sum it. Okay, we'll pay you $100 million a year. We'll distribute it to the publishers, the primary news publishers within your country, and that's that. And you don't gotta set up teams and pay the people. Why the US has a problem with it? The US views the Online News Act as discriminatory against American tech companies, since Google and Meta are the primary targets. I mean, that's just how people get their news. As you saw in the Kuzma discussion, US Trade Representative Jamie Greer has specifically flagged it as trade irritant, and it's expected to be a pressure point on the Kuzma review. The Trump administration sees it as Canada unfairly penalizing US digital firms. I mean, like, we don't have Canadian digital firms. That's the problem. Right? Like, I imagine they'd have done this to the Canadian firms too. It just, there isn't it. We use the American one. Where things stand now, the law remains on the books, though Canada's relationship with Meta on this front is still fractured. News links are still blocked on Facebook and Instagram in Canada. It's become a flashpoint, not just domestically, but now in the broader Canada-US trade tension, making it one of the more publicly compromised pieces of legislation Canada has to defend heading into the Kuzma review. Interesting. Like, this is the downside, right? That if you make it, like, if it costs too much, they'll just remove that aspect of the of their service, right? Like getting a deal like what you got with Google, but then the onus is on the government to set up the system to distribute that properly to news publishers in a way that allows good journalism, right? I mean, I personally think we're going to see a new wave of journalism come out because we like the stuff I was watching, like Johnny Harris, who posts content and essentially just he does his journalism but then distributes it through these sites. It seems to be a far more successful model than doing journalism like for a publication, a publisher. I think we're going to see a lot more of the small form publishers show up in just the current ecosystem. But getting it so that you can't get news through Facebook and Instagram. I mean, I don't really use them a whole lot, but that sucks. That people not getting news. Yeah, so basically, I don't think Kuzma's gonna be immediately renegotiated. Like, I think both sides intend to drag it out. Like, Canada kind of wants to drag it out until there's a new administration that is, you know, not Trump there, or maybe drag it out till after the midterms where he loses a lot of his expected to lose a lot of his influence. And Trump, like, dragging out a deal is just a tactic to him, right? There doesn't appear to be anything important about missing that date. You just trigger yearly reviews that'll keep happening. Canada Online News Act. Now that is an interesting, because I understand the gist of it, but at the same time, just force. If you do this, you don't force the news agencies to interact with the distribution platform. Like, all this has done so far is, yeah, you get $100 million a year for Canadian news publishers, but now the publishers don't push their stuff. Like, what you want to see is this. You want them to be interacting, because, like, this is usually how I learn about news, through news organizations that post their content online. So this is the direction you want them to go, because this is how. And they're saying you can't get this the same through because, like, I also get news through TikTok, for example, and they're saying you can't do this on Instagram and Facebook. I mean, like, Facebook, from my understanding, is the biggest social media platform in Canada, and they still can't do news. That feels. So Facebook doesn't have any news-related content in Canada? Like, something feels off here. That's essentially correct, and it's been a real mess. Here's what the situation actually looks like. Does that mean that if Because one of the things I was looking at is the content I create here. I'm looking for other places to put it in Facebook, and Facebook Live was it's on my list of things to really look into. But this is essentially a news show. Does that mean this content would not be allowed on Facebook? What Meta did in response to the Online News Act, content from global news outlets, including news publishers and broadcasters, is not available to people accessing Facebook and Instagram in Canada. Canada cannot view or share news on either platform, and they cannot see links or content from any news outlet pages or accounts. What? The workaround. It's not a perfect back out though. Ways of circumventing the news have emerged, with people posting screenshot of Canadian news on Facebook and in an ironic twist, Meta's own AI chatbot was found to be using Canadian news media websites when questioned about current affairs, essentially getting around its own ban. So if you're able to post screenshots on Facebook of the news, this kind of content would essentially fall under the same thing. I mean, maybe there would be more demand for people talking about the news on Facebook, because you can't access it through standard method. That's interesting. Real world impact. The consequences have been pretty significant for Canadian media. Nearly half of online news media engagement dropped in the first year, including 85% on Facebook and Instagram. A loss that has not been compensated by increase on other social media platforms. Nearly a third of local news outlets that were active on social media are now dormant. Perhaps most concerning, Canadians continue to learn about politics and current events through Facebook and Instagram, but through a more biased and less fractured lens than before. And many Canadians don't even realize the shift has occurred and are not seeking news elsewhere. Where things stand now, as of January 2026, the Canadian federal government said it is in ongoing discussions with Meta to find a path forward so Canadians can access news online, with Canada indicating it's going to be flexible when it comes to the Online News Act, but that the US won't be given a free hand to dictate how that flexibility plays out. In short, so the short answer is yes, formal news content is still blocked on Facebook and Instagram in Canada. It's essentially been way out since 2023. The law that's supposed to help Canadian journalism has in many ways made things worse for smaller outlets that depend on social media traffic. That sucks. That also means there's a non-0% chance that when I try and put this on Facebook, it will get banned. Yeah. I didn't know. Like, I'm not a big Facebook user. Like, I might like a photo from a family or something that posts on there. I don't particularly use Facebook or Instagram that much. I didn't even know this happened. Like, the company I used came to a deal. That's hard. I don't think that's how you support journalism, though. Like, this is very tangibly affecting the reach of journalists. I think you just have to let journalism evolve with the time. Like, there's always going to be a demand for good journalism. And social media and these sites is now how you push that journalism. And so I think you have to let the medium evolve with the times. Like, you'd almost be better off just charging, because Facebook, who were the two big ones? That they said? Facebook, Instagram, and then Meta, which is like YouTube, right? And YouTube, Meta came to an agreement with them. Like, you almost, rather than charging them a fee to use Canadian news, you need to charge them a fee to access the Canadian consumer. Like, to allow the app to exist in your country, you charge them a fee, and then you use the money from that to, like, pay news outlets, ensure there's no abuse within the platform, and to support, like, the ecosystem as well. And that way you're charging them money, they're gonna pay it because it's incredibly profitable to them, right? To have access to all the people. And then you can use that money to assist with the effects. I mean, just in the budget, right? If you want to use it for healthcare, you can use it for healthcare. Just use the money to help the people, charge them to access the people. And that it gets around this whole weird, oh yeah, you have to pay news outlets to use their stuff. Like, AI uses everything. It's almost impossible to prove, but like it uses everything. It's going to be very difficult to prove that AI used specific content in its output, but you could charge an AI company to have access to your people, because that's how it's going to make money. I mean, in the future, I don't think it makes money that way now. And then you use that money to fund the ecosystems that AI would essentially replace. Well, we don't got to worry about that right now. I think they should change it to a different, like a different method, rather than stating it's rather than an online news app. Just create a fee to access the Canadian populace. Maybe, like, you can't. It would have to be like a profit-based fee, rather than a base fee, because if you put a base fee in, then you prevent any other company from being able to access the market. But if it's like a percentage of profits that you have to give to the Canadian government to access people, that would make a lot more sense. And I think that would receive a lot less pushback than the Online News Act. And then you create a department that spends that funding to fund news agencies, mental health agencies, or any other services you need to help the people. Okay, I'm gonna move on. What was the other one I wanted? I mean, I've kind of touched on all of these. Okay, we got an Iran ceasefire deadline. War deal by April 26th. I mean, that was yesterday. What else do we have? Where is this? Gaz's first election. That's what I'm going to look at next. Oh, I'm going to grab a drink first. Let's cut this video. I will be back in a minute. Oh. Me too. All right. Let's get back to it. Gaza election. 20 years. Palestinian authorities held local elections this past Saturday in a single Gaza community and across the West Bank. The first election in any part of Hamas-run Gaza in more than 2 decades, and are calling it a step towards a long-delayed presidential election and eventual statehood. Okay, Hook. Gaza just held its first vote in 20 years, but Hamas couldn't run. Only 23% turned out, and a 90-year-old president who's never faced re-election is claiming it's a step towards statehood. Who actually won here? Let's see if there's something here. Gaza. Four months, 3 months. I'm not gonna find it that way. Gaza election. 2 days ago, Palestinians vote in occupied West Bank and Gaza in first election since outbreak of war. Perfect. DW News. Short. Gaza holds first election since Hamas takeover. Fox News. Oh, I don't like shorts. You don't get any context with a short. Let's see the one we got.
There were long lines outside one of the makeshift polling stations in Deir el-Balah. People were keen to cast their ballots before voting closed in the central Gaza town. It was forced to shut at 6 p.m. A lack of electricity in the war-ravaged area meant no voting after dark. Officials have had to improvise amid widespread destruction.
We manufactured the ballot boxes locally. We produced 110 boxes for use at polling stations. The ballot papers were printed in the Gaza Strip. We used an effective alternative to the electoral ink by using special ink pens provided by the World Health Organization.
At the same time, voting took place across the whole of the occupied West Bank. It's under the administrative control of the Fatah party of 90-year-old Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Independent polling says Hamas, the group that carried out the October 7th, 2023 terror attacks against Israel, is still the most popular political faction in both Gaza and the West Bank. But there are no lists officially associated with Hamas in either territory. The vote in Gaza is being seen as largely symbolic. It's being held only in Deir el-Balah, one of the few areas in the enclave not to have experienced an Israeli ground invasion.
So this isn't like this isn't across all of Gaza. This is one small part of Gaza that's having an election. I hear there were recent elections in Gaza. Can you tell me more about it? Was it all of Gaza voting? Let's see, we got thinking on. Perfect.
Hopefully the rest of the governorates and the entire Gaza Strip will have elections and be distinguished after the fierce war. These 2.5 years of war, destruction, homes and broken streets, and we will see, God willing, our cities improve.
The Palestinian Authority also hopes the election there will help reinforce its claim to authority over the territory after its ouster by Hamas in 2007. It has, however, faced accusations of being both corrupt and ineffectual.
DW correspondent Emily Gordine has been covering the story from the occupied West Bank, and a short while ago I asked her how elections looked there and in Gaza's Deir el-Balah.
Well, in Gaza, elections are taking place in rubble and amid continued airstrikes. In the last 48 hours, Israeli airstrikes have killed about 17 Palestinians.
So, Israel is still bombing Gaza? I thought this part of the war was over. But let's see what it says here. You are correct. There was a significant election held just this past weekend on Saturday, April 25th, 2026. 2 days ago. However, it was a very specific and limited vote rather than a general election for the entire territory. Here are the key details regarding what took place. Where did the voting happen? It was not all of Gaza. The election was held only in the city of Deir al-Baha, central Gaza. This city was chosen largely because it remained relatively intact compared to other parts of the Strip following the conflict the past 2 years. Outside of Gaza, the election also took place across the 183 local councils in the West Bank. So the West Bank is... map up. I want this one. So we have Lebanon, we have Israel here. We have the Gaza Strip, which is this dotted line, and the West Bank, which is this dotted. A much larger part. Compared to Gaza. Well, Gaza's like mostly city from what I understand. Yeah, Israel. Okay. It's not the one I was reading. This is These were municipal elections, so the local government. Meaning voters were choosing members for local councils that managed day-to-day services like water, roads, electricity. It was not a presidential or legislative election. The Palestinian Authority has not held a general election since 2006. Why this is a big deal? First in 20 years, this was the first time any part of Gaza had participated in an election since 2006. PA involvement. The vote was organized by the West Bank-based Palestinian Authority. Since Hamas took control of Gaza in 2007, the PA has effectively been unable to operate there. So holding this vote in Gaza was a major symbolic attempt at showing territorial unity. The role of Hamas did not officially field candidates, as the rules required candidates to recognize the Palestinian Liberation Organization platform, which includes recognizing Israel. However, they did not block the election from happening. Turnout results. The participation rate holds two different stories. Turnout was quite low at roughly 23%. Officials attributed this to the massive displacement of residents and outdated voter registries. In the West Bank, turnout was much higher at approximately 56%. Outcome: the Fahad movement, led by President Mahmoud Abbas, claimed a sweeping victory in most contested areas, including defeats in Deir al-Baha, though many independent lists also won seats. The Palestinian Authority has described this as a pilot, a potential first step towards long-delayed general elections for a president and parliament, though no dates for those have been set. Is Israel still bombing Gaza? What's the frequency and how many have died?
People in Deir al-Balah, in sort of south.
There it is, Deir al-Baha. Bala? Let me hear it one more time.
In Deir al-Balah, in
Deir al-Balah. Not how I was saying it. Deir al-Balah. Okay, as of late April 2026, the situation in Gaza has shifted from high-intensity war footing of 2023-2024 to a complex, fragile state of intermittent conflict under an effective ceasefire. Are they still bombing? Yes, but the frequency and nature of airstrikes have changed significantly. A formal ceasefire began October 11, 2025. Since then, large-scale area carpet bombing has largely ceased in favor of targeted strikes. Strikes are now described as sporadic or intermittent. In the last 24 hours, for example, only 2 fatalities were reported, which is a stark contrast to the hundreds per day seen at the peak of the conflict. Peace deal implementation. Under a 20-point peace deal brokered earlier this year, Israel has withdrawn its forces to predetermined lines, though it still maintains administrative and security control over approximately 53% of the Gaza Strip. Death toll statistics. Okay, there. We kind of already went into that. Current living conditions. While the bombing is less frequent, the humanitarian crisis remains. Much of the territory is without consistent electricity. A recent strike on a power line in early April 2026 cut off drinking water for nearly 500,000 people in the south. As we discussed regarding the recent vote in Deir al-Balah, there are attempts to transition back to local municipal control, but the IDF Chief of Staff recently warranted that 2026 will likely remain a year of fighting as the military manages multiple fronts, including Lebanon and Iran. The shift towards local elections and the implementation of a peace deal suggests a move towards stabilization. The peace remains a high-tension military occupation in over half the territory. So that's what's currently going on in Gaza. I mean, like, elections are better than no elections. It is a good first sign. Moving back to something more stable. Okay, where were we?
Sort of south to centre Gaza, that's where people have been allowed to cast their ballot. They've been doing so under difficult circumstances because ballot boxes were not allowed into the territory by the Israeli authorities. They've had to build their own.
So they had to build their own ballot boxes?
Ballot boxes from the rubble. Ink has also been difficult to get in, which is why Palestinians have had to use a material used by UNICEF to mark children.
Like that. That looks like a pretty good ballot box, all things considered. Like,
who have been vaccinated as a sort of stamp or signature in some form on these ballots, as we understand. Now, in the West Bank, the situation is obviously very different. It's not done in rubble, but it is done. The elections are taking place amid settler violence. We've heard of several reports of settler violence in villages where elections are taking place. So all in all, difficult circumstances.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. Do these elections feel relevant to Palestinians, or do they feel sort of disconnected from real power?
It really depends on who you speak to. We were earlier in a village called Sinjal, and the school where people cast their ballots, it was bustling. It was full of people keen to cast their ballot, to cast their vote, because they say it is their democratic duty. They understand themselves as a democratic country, as a democratic nation, and they see it as imperative to use that voice and to use that say in these municipal elections to find a leader that represents them. But we've also seen villages in which not a single person went out and voted. And so it really depends on who you speak to.
Like that's, like, it could just be like suppression there, right? Like, you've seen issues of violence, so from my understanding, I don't want to go too into this because I don't have the details. when they say settler violence, the West Bank is largely a Palestinian area. Israel has created a lot of settlements within the West Bank, where primarily Israelis live, and so they largely call them settlers. And so when they're saying settler violence, they're referring to these communities that have been built within the West Bank that are violent towards the communities that were already there. I think, my understanding of it. I mean, that this is one of the sections of the world that is complicated.
See these elections as a form of democratic participation, and then others see it as delegitimate and not really free elections.
Emily, how is Israel viewing these elections?
Well, the average Israeli will not know that Palestinians are holding municipal elections. But the security apparatus in Israel has undoubtedly been watching the developments in the occupied West Bank and Gaza very carefully. We've been able to speak to certain people on the ground in the occupied West Bank telling us that certain candidates...
What was I asking last? Okay, can you give me a breakdown of what's happening in the West Bank? Like, I said it was a complicated thing, so I should at least provide some context to make sure I'm not completely off base.
Who previously had wanted to run, had been receiving calls by Israeli military officials urging them not to put themselves forward, not to be a candidate, and so they actually...
That does not sound like a free election. That's for
They withdrew their candidacy because of their political background. You have to understand Hamas and also the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. These are two parties that are seen as terrorist organizations by Israel, and not just by Israel, also many European countries and the US see Hamas, for example, as a terrorist organization, and therefore they are seen as completely illegitimate. And so candidates who might have run as independents, who had wanted to run as independents, who might have had some certain affiliations with these groups, have then been urged not to run.
I mean, like, she's old enough that she remembers when it was a democratic place. Because there hasn't been any from 2006, but before that it was a democratic country, essentially.
These elections.
The election officials say the goal is to link the West Bank and Gaza politically as one system. So does this vote bring the territories closer together or highlight how divided they are?
It was very difficult to tell from on the ground. The realities in Gaza and the West Bank are vastly different. But the signal that the election committee wanted to send here is that it is one nation, it is one people, and they should be treated as such. There shouldn't be a separate Gaza and a separate occupied West Bank. There should be one entity, it should be seen as one entity, and that is the political signal that this sends. But of course, the reality and oftentimes also the political opinions on the ground will vary vastly, also depending on the realities that people live through day in and day out.
Right, Emily, we'll leave it there, but really great to get that update from you. Emily Gordine, DW correspondent, joining us today from the occupied West Bank. Thanks so much.
Yeah, like
Emily Gordine
has
been talking to Palestinian voters in the West Bank today, asking what these elections meant to them.
This is a democratic celebration for us. It's important to vote for someone who serves you and represents you in your Palestinian society.
We are a democratic country. We must aspire towards change.
I mean, democracy has been proven to work. I don't think it's the only working system, but from my understanding, it is the best. Like, giving people a vote in their leadership is very conducive to creating a stable country.
Towards a new reality where we avoid destruction.
And the opposite gets you the opposite effects. Not giving people a say tends to not be conducive to a stable country.
People today are living without goals in their lives. Very young men with no goals. And many young people want to get married or want to secure accommodation, and there's no one to guide them or to support them. Unemployment is very high.
We're not expecting the mayor to remove a checkpoint or the fence around Sinjil, but he can contribute in developing the town, creating opportunities, and maintaining roads.
Okay, I should link this one too before I go back to root. Should show 3 times. Yes. Perfect. Okay. Let's get a quick breakdown to make sure we know what's going on. The situation in the West Bank of late April 2026 is defined by a significant political push for local legitimacy, contrasted against the most restrictive security environment in over 2 decades. While the active war is concentrated in Gaza, the West Bank is experiencing what humanitarian organizations describe as a systematic tightening of control and a surge in internal displacement. The April 25th local elections. As we touched on earlier, the local elections held this past Saturday were the most significant political event in years. A fragmented vote. While the Palestinian Authority, PA, pushed for a unified election, it only took place in 183 local authorities, mostly in the West Bank, and 1 municipality in Gaza. So that's why they're bringing it up so much, because 1 municipality in Gaza also joined. The electoral system, for the first time, a new open list proportional representation system was used for municipal councils, while smaller village councils use individual nomination. Fatah's performance. Supporters of President Mohamed Abbas won a majority of the contested seats. However, a significant 88% of candidates ran as independents. Oh, that's crazy. Signaling a deep public desire for alternatives to the traditional party structure. Record high movement restrictions. The day-to-day life of Palestinians in the West Bank is currently hampered by a physical blockade that has reached historic levels. The numbers. OCHA, the UN's humanitarian ring, recently mapped 925 movement obstacles across the West Bank, including checkpoints, gates, and earth mounds. This is the highest number recorded in 20 years. Economic toll. These restrictions have effectively atomized the West Bank, making it nearly impossible for workers to reach jobs or for goods to move between cities. Community displacement and settlement expansion. The landscape of the West Bank is shifting rapidly due to a combination of official military orders and settler activity. Displaced communities. Since January 2023, 45 Palestinian communities have been entirely displaced. In 2026 alone, 9 more communities were forced to leave their lands due to a coercive environment created by settler attacks and access restrictions. Demolitions. Large-scale demolitions of Palestinian structures continue at a high rate. UN experts warned in March 2026 that these measures are accelerating demographic composition change, particularly in the Jerusalem governance. So, like, I remember, how would I call that? Palestinian house surrounded by settler community. I want to find a specific picture. This, I think, is it. In a video, like, they had built like a Jewish community here, right? But someone refused to move out of where they currently lived, and they essentially blocked them off with a wall just around their house, and they have a little path leading out to like a road that they can use. Like, the lengths they go to are insane. I actually want to see if I could find this. I remember watching a video on it. Oh, I'm not gonna be able to find the video. It was like in the middle of a documentary, so there's no way we're gonna be able to find it. Where was I reading? Okay. Security escalation and Jerusalem. Violence has intensified as military operations frequently spill over from the border regions into urban centers. The genocide extension warning. In early March 2026, UN experts issues a special alert warning that the intensity of military operations previously reserved for Gaza is now being seen in the West Bank. I mean, if you use it somewhere and it works, right? Of course they're going to start to use it there. Al-Aqsa compound. Tensions remain at a boiling point in Jerusalem. In 2025, there were over 73,000 settler incursions into the Al-Aqsa mosque compound, the highest in history. This continues to be the primary flashpoint that triggers wider unrest across the territory. What the heck is this? Summary of the current state. Government. Local council elected April 25th. Trend. Stabilizing politically. Movement 925 checkpoints/roadblocks. Trend worsening. Safety. High settler violence. Targeted IDF raids. Trend critical. Economy high unemployment. Fragmented markets. The trend is declining. The West Bank is currently a pressure cooker, where the recent local elections provided a brief outlet for political expression, but the underlying physical and economic restrictions are tighter than they have been in a generation. With the Palestinian Authority attempting to reassert control through these elections, do you think local government can actually succeed while these movement restrictions remain in place? I mean, movement restrictions are a nasty thing. Take you off the thing. Yeah. I don't know a lot of the history, like why Israel is here, there's like a lot of the world sees it as an occupation of the land. Okay, let's read this, and I'm going to ask it that as well. Al-Aqwas Compound, also known as Al-Sharaf, or the Noble Sanctuary. Okay, that's a lot easier. Is a 35-acre religious site in the old city of Jerusalem. It is one of the most contested and sacred places of land in the world. Let's have a look at it from Temple Mount, Jerusalem. Al-Aqwas Mosque. We can go down. Let's have a look at this place. Ooh, it's like an old temple. That looks like a new temple over that. Interesting. What is over here? It's a huge compound area, right? Look at that. So this is like one of their religious sites. This is Temple Mount. That building we were just looking at. And the first one was the Al-Aqwas Mosque. See if we can get a different angle of it. Oh, we're in the sun now. This is a place with historic importance. I mean, it looks old. Look at the old pillars that are just placed on the ground. Go that way? Can't. I mean, like, look at the detail, though, for how old this place is. That one has clearly come off. Somebody set it back. Probably not allowed. Okay. We had to look at it. People often use the name Al-Aqwas, refer to a single building, as actually a walled plaza containing several important landmarks. The plaza, the mosque, the Dome of the Rock. The iconic gold dome octagonal structure at the center of the plaza is an Islamic shrine built over a sacred rock. The compound is unique because it is a holy site for two major world religions. In Islam, it is the third holiest site after those two. Muslims believe it is the location where the Prophet Muhammad was transported during the night journey and from which he ascended to heaven. It was also the first Qibla, the direct Muslim face for prayer. The direction Muslims face for prayer before it was changed to the Kaaba. Okay. In Jerusalem, the site is known as the Temple Mount. Okay, that's the other name we saw it. Right? The Temple Mound. It is the holiest site in Judaism because it is the location where the first and second temples stood in ancient times. According to Jewish tradition, it is also the site of the foundation stone, the place from which the world was created. So, In Islam, it is the third holiest site. In Judaism, it is the holiest site. The status quo. Due to its shared significance, the site is managed under a delicate set of rules known as the status quo. The compound is managed by the Jerusalem Islamic Waqf. Okay. A religious trust funded and overseen by the government of Jordan. Israel maintains overall security control of the site and its perimeters. Under the long-standing agreement, Muslims are permitted to pray on the compound, while non-Muslims are allowed to visit as tourists but are not permitted to pray there. Why it is a flashpoint? The compound is often the epicenter of religious tension in the context of your previous questions. Sovereignty, Palestinian view the site. Where is this on a broader yeah. Oh. So they drew the line, and it's in the West Bank, part of Jerusalem, right? That's the city. The Temple Mound is there. So is this the old city, is this a whole thing? Like, are those old walls? I see that. They are. So that was an old walled structure. I don't know, I like old. Okay, not what I was expecting to see in the center of this, what I thought was a ruined area, but maybe, I mean like a preserved area. Okay, clearly, get me above ground image. Come on. Clearly, it's still very... Where's my... Oh, like... Oh. It's not what I was expecting at all. So this is the holy site. We have the Temple Mound and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That looks like old structures. You can't fall there anymore. All right. Where were we? There's another question I wanted to ask. What was it? I should ask it and then... Attempting to reassert control through these elections. I hear a lot that the West Bank is occupied. Can you tell me more information about that? Let it think for this one. You see, Claude, you really got to fix your voice mode. I despise that when I go into voice mode, it starts giving me like shorter, less engaged answers. Like this is not an improvement. This is something I have to work around. term occupied refers to the legal and physical status of the West Bank under international law. Following the Six-Day War in 1967, at the time Israel captured the territory from Jordan, and it has remained under Israel military and civil control ever since. Like, isn't Israel still doing that? Like, it sounds like they have no intentions. In Lebanon, they've secured a certain amount of territory. It sounds like they have no intentions of giving it back, unless they're forced to, in a peace deal or something. So this does appear to be a tactic they've been using since 1967. To understand how this occupation works in 2026, it helps to look at the three distinct ways the land is divided and governed. Oh goodness, it's complicated already. The Area A, B, and C system. The West Bank is not governed as a single unit. Under the Oslo Accord, agreements from the 1990s that were meant to be temporary but are still in effect, the land is divided into three zones. Area A, about 18% of the land, includes major Palestinian cities like Ramallah and Nablus. The Palestinian Authority is responsible for civil life and internal security there. Area B, approximately 22%, includes Palestinian villages. The Palestinian Authority handles civil matters, education, health, but Israel maintains overriding security control. Okay. That doesn't sound like a good idea, but Area C, approximately 60%. This is the largest and most congenous part of the West Bank. Israel maintains exclusive control over security, planning, and construction. This area contains all Israeli settlements and most of the West Bank agricultural land and water resources. I mean, 60%, yeah, it's going to have most of the land. And given that this is cities and this is villages, this is everything else, right? Like, my understanding, when they built the town and they had to like lock that house in. Oh, I don't know. They had to like lock that house in. That's because it was like a rural house built there, and they were building a town in like a rural area. So that's how that happened. For years, the Palestinian family home stood amid swaths of farmland, but now it lies behind a yellow gate controlled by Israeli soldiers. Not the one I was reading. Settlements and international law. A major part of the occupation debate involves Israeli settlements, communities built by Israeli citizens on West Bank land, legal status, the United Nations and European Union, and the majority of international communities consider these settlements illegal under international law. Specifically, the Fourth Geneva Convention, which prohibits an occupying power from transferring its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. 2026 shift. In February 2026, the Israeli cabinet approved measures that significantly expanded their authority in the West Bank. This has been described by critics and legal experts as de facto annexation, as it moves administration power from the military to civil government institutions, effectively treating parts of the West Bank like sovereign Israeli territory. The physical reality, checkpoints and barriers, we've already talked about that. Why it's called an occupation. In a legal sense, it's called an occupation because military law. Palestinians in the West Bank are subjected to Israeli military law, while their Israeli neighbors and settlement subjects are subjected to Israeli civil law. Okay. Lack of sovereignty. The Palestinian residents do not have a sovereign state, a military, or control over their own borders, airspace, or water rights. temporary versus permanent. International law views occupation as a temporary state following a conflict because this has lasted nearly 60 years and involves the permanent building of cities, settlements. Many international bodies argue it has become an illegal occupation or annexation. In short, occupied describes a system where one population, Palestinians, live under the military and administrative control of another state, Israel, without having the citizenship or rights of that state. Okay, so it was a part of Jordan. Then Six-Day War in 1967, it was occupied. Jordan's over here. Okay. All right, well, that just explains to me exactly how complicated that part of the world is. I mean, it's not a good situation, that's for sure. But I don't exactly know what we can do. Alright, well, I'm going to be getting off. Okay. Thanks for watching. I'm probably going to move to streaming twice a week. I find that I was streaming too much, so I wasn't actually getting the editing part done. With the time that I had, so I'm gonna try to stream Monday and Friday from now on. That gives me time to work on distribution and the editing aspect of this, which I've been procrastinating on massively. Alright. Well, thanks for watching. You guys have a good night. 0 drop frames. That's great. Okay. Let's